Fantastic.
Always happy to help DJ.
All right. Can you see those slides?
Yes, I can.
All right. Welcome in, everybody, to Bonfire number 9, our second to last, or our penultimate bonfire. Tonight, we are going to be talking about international relations innovation. We have Chabu joining us tonight. She has done lots of international relations sessions already at CU. So she is very well qualified to be with us tonight. And she's going to bring some of that expertise to tonight's session. If you haven't joined any of her sessions, highly recommend them. Thank you for being here. How are you doing tonight?
I am good. Also want to give a major shout out to Luna, who's my partner in crime and all things related to IR. And this is one of my favorite conversations to have when we talk about our democracy. This is how we deal with our wider community. So excited to dive into it.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning Luna too. She's actually doing a lecture right now on climate. This is a CU first, so we have 2 events going on at the same time, which shows how much we've grown. So really cool that we have a climate lesson going on and a civic innovation lesson going on at the same time. All right, I'll let you start us off with an icebreaker.
All right. So icebreaker question. Where is the one place you would take a visitor in your hometown, city, or country? So you have some friends coming to visit, and you want to go take them to something special, something that you can't Google or like the normal tourist would take you to. What are your recommendations?
I'm excited for these.
Yes. This is going to be like the ultimate travel itinerary coming up.
It's like a travel guide.
And don't forget to mention what hometown is, because that's important context. Well, everyone's typing. Nick, you want to give us your answer?
So it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, because I'm from near Springfield, Massachusetts. That's the big attraction. I would bring people there.
Support that. Someone said they take you to the pyramids in Egypt. That would be very cool.
That's cool.
The Strand bookstore in NYC. Zoe, I'm gonna go investigate and let you know how it is. Because I'm also based out in New York right now.
I like that we got Walden Pond, very famous.
The temples in Luxor, that would be amazing. Some of these places sound really cool, but I'm not sure what they are. Pueblo Mágico in Santiago, Mexico. I'd love to hear more as to like what that is or what experience it would be.
The Tetons in Wyoming, that's really cool.
I'm very much like Samuel. I would take you to like a local bookstore. I don't know if all my friends would love that spot, but I would be a big fan. So a cool like dinner / pub spot in Brazil was recommended. Oh, ancient cities would be awesome. So an old city in Baku Boulevard. I mean, we have a very global community. I feel like you could essentially say, I'm going to this country on this week. Can I meet a builder in this place? And you'd be set.
So true. Yeah, this is amazing. A lot in Egypt. A lot of cool sightseeing in Egypt.
The Turkey Hill experience, which is 2 hours away from my house, in Pennsylvania. I wonder what that is. I love when things are like super entrenched in like a local culture.
Yeah, Turkey Hill ice cream. Have you ever seen that at the grocery store? It's pretty famous ice cream.
No, I've never had it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, thank you everyone for your amazing recommendations. Should any of us come visit, we already know where to go.
Exactly. All right, so let's get to tonight's lesson. It was fitting that we were asking about all these places all over the world because we are talking about international relations tonight. So the first case study we're going to do is historical, and then we're going to look at some more modern examples. First one we're going to look at is the United Nations. You might be thinking like, how is the UN in innovation in any way? It seems like full of lots of old people, pretty stodgy. But at the time, it was an innovation. If we're defining innovation as a novel solution to a well-defined problem, well, the UN is an attempt to prevent war, prevent conflict, promote peace among nations. And that didn't exist prior to the 1900s. There wasn't this idea of worldwide cooperation. There wasn't really this idea of sovereignty of countries that much longer before that. So, and like many other innovations, it was not the first attempt at something like this. The first attempt at an international governing body was called the League of Nations. It was created after World War I. During World War I, as you might have read about in your history classes, we saw many different countries go to war because there was not one central body that was preventing that from happening. They all had incentives to go to war. And so countries after the war got together and said, we don't want this to happen again, so we're going to create this League of Nations. The problem is that it failed. The League of Nations failed pretty badly. There was another war called World War II, which you've probably heard of. And so the whole purpose of the League of Nations, it didn't meet that purpose, and it failed. And one big reason why was because there were some pretty big countries that were not part of it. First was the UN. The president at the time of the creation of the League of Nations was Woodrow Wilson. He was a big supporter of the League of Nations. But if you know how treaties work in the United States, even if a president wants to join a treaty, it's not enough. It still needs to be approved by the Senate. And the Senate did not approve of being part of the League of Nations. So the US was never part of it. That's what this cartoon is depicting here. And it wasn't just the US. Germany was not a part of it. That's because the people that started the League of Nations wanted to punish Germany for their role in World War I. Bad move that helped lead to World War II. Same with Japan. Japan joined Germany on the side that was against the Allies. And then finally, the USSR was not a part of it. So League of Nations failed first attempt. But the second attempt was more successful. So after the League of Nations failed, and after the horrors of World War II, the world's remaining great powers knew they had to do something. They couldn't let another world war happen. So the US, the USSR, the UK, France, and China all got together and created the United Nations. They wanted to give it more power than the League of Nations had to maintain world peace. And that's what they did. They also quite famously put out a statement that became known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was super important, especially after the terrible events of World War II, like the Holocaust. So this document was aimed to protect the rights and freedoms of all humans. It had not been done before that there was a document that was aimed at the entire world. Now, while there has not been a World War III, so fingers crossed on that always. So you could argue the UN has done its job at preventing another world war. It still has failed in many other places. There have been many smaller wars since its creation in 1948. And so I don't want you to think that it's been perfect by any means. Here are some other criticisms of the UN. The UN original charter gives veto power over decisions to those 5 founding members. And what that does is it allows any of those countries to derail any potential peacekeeping mission. So for example, if the UN, if 4 of the 5 members wanted to go in to Ukraine to try to prevent war in Ukraine, they would not be allowed to do that because Russia is a voting member and they have a veto power over that. Second, they failed to prevent conflicts and genocides in many places around the world. So in Bosnia, Rwanda, Syria, Kosovo, Sri Lanka, and many other places that you probably know about, most recently Ukraine, the UN has failed to be able to keep the peace. And then finally, and this is all kind of intertwined, the UN is not taken seriously by many governments, including by some Security Council members. The Security Council are those 5 original members plus some new countries that have been added to it, especially those countries that have veto power. They don't seem to take the decisions of the UN seriously. So Although the UN has been in innovation, international relations, it has not been completely successful. So let's hear from you a little bit.
Yes. So with all that context and information, and also the things that you know and have experienced, we have two key questions here. One, in what ways has the UN been successful? So how have they achieved some really important goals and objectives? And then two, in what ways have they been a disappointment? So what are their insufficiencies? What's the next wave of development and things that they need to learn how to do better? And of course, you can throw your answers in the Bonfire chat. So someone said, when it comes to veto power, there are also two governments or groups, the G4 and the Uniting for Consensus. So the idea that there's also almost like different power dynamics that exist outside of the UN, and the fact that you need buy-in from other countries, not just the powerful five, in order to pass resolutions. That's super important. Establishing the 17 SDGs. Yes, so the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals / global priorities and some key metrics that are tied to the idea of these are the things that we need to do to essentially set the entire world up to have access to fundamental needs and rights. And it's been a really great asset for mobilizing hundreds of countries, organizations, governments to kind of focus in on some key priorities.
That's a good one.
Also being super present in refugee crises. This is true. There are very few other governing bodies that have been able to be involved in every refugee crisis that's come to existence in the past couple decades. So Alan brought up something really interesting, which was failing the Millennium Goals. So prior to the SDG goals that we've been having now, the goal is to achieve all the SDG goals by 2030. But before the SDGs, and maybe Nick, you have some context on this too, but decades ago, they had the millennial goals, which are essentially the same exact thing. And they had the same kind of length or deadline, but we never actually achieved those goals. So the 17 SDGs are really just like another iteration of that. And it bodes the promise of, will we just set another version of the SDGs 20, 30 years from now and fail again?
Right. No, it's a good point. I think the important thing is that we're working towards them, and that's why it's important to have the goals. Like if we don't hit all of them, obviously that is disappointing, but it's better to have set those goals and worked towards them than to have not set them and not tried to achieve them.
Yes, this is true. Samuel brings up the idea of prioritizing diplomacy as a tool, as opposed to instinctually going towards things like war and sanctions and things of that nature. What can we solve by talking first? I think the UN has really made that standard practice in most conflicts. All right, no, thank you so much for all your answers. These are super, super insightful. And I think we're ready to dive into another case study.
Yeah, and thanks for the clarification, Alan, on the number of founding members. What I was mentioning was the original Security Council in the countries with veto power, but you're right. They needed way more than just those 5 to found the UN. Great. So yeah, tell us about cybersecurity, Trevi. We're gonna transition a little bit to something a little bit more modern.
Yes, so cybersecurity and international relations. This has become a priority in the past couple of years for obvious reasons. Our world is only becoming more and more digital. And now that we enter a world where everyone is connected to the internet, countries can't just rely on traditional borders and physical things as a method of keeping themselves safe from bad actors. So anyone with internet connection, including rogue malevolent groups or state actors, has the potential to cripple a country's infrastructure or economic systems or elections. So what are some of the ways that this can take place? So for instance, hackers could break into the controls of critical infrastructure. So things like your access to electricity or water or even nuclear power plants exclusively through the means of a computer. Attacks on global economic systems can also take place. So a key example of this would be SWIFT payments. It's a system that allows a lot of banks to transfer money to other bank accounts. Hacking into that system could compromise someone's access to funds or compromise the access of funds for millions of people even. And so what are some preventative measures that countries can take to protect themselves? We have a few ideas. One, testing cyber threats and solutions in simulated environments. We can look at, these are the things that are likely to happen or could happen, or these are vulnerabilities in our ecosystem. And here are some of the ways that we can almost put in practice rounds so that should that situation take place, we have a strategy for resolving that challenge. Another example would be interdepartmental and interorganizational cooperation. Communication between some really big institutions is key in making sure that there are vulnerabilities that can be resolved beforehand, as opposed to those vulnerabilities only taking place after the fact. And then sharing information with other countries. Again, in the spirit of collaboration, a simple piece of insight could really stand between a massive catastrophe or being able to prevent something from taking place. All right, and we have another rapid response round. Any cybersecurity threats that we might have missed. So we gave a pretty robust list, but what are some other ideas that you guys can come up with?
Yeah, you might know more than we do on this if you're really tapped into to what's going on in some of the dark corners of the internet.
Looks like several people are typing. Helen gave a shout out to Samuel. So an example would be what happened in the 2016 elections in the US. So propaganda that was kind of pushed through Facebook, and there not being enough security around that platform and protecting people and the way that they interpreted the 2016 elections. That's definitely an example of cybersecurity threats.
Yeah, that's a good question. If that counts as like a breach, if you're just using the tools that are given to you by a platform and like putting disinformation on that platform, is that considered like a hack like we're going to talk about, or is that just like taking advantage of the platform's rules? It's an open question.
So Nicole brought up the idea of the fact that we're super connected digitally and globally, which is awesome. But if a chain were to break in that system, would it impact multiple countries as well? Is a key idea. So being interconnected is amazing, but also a little bit dangerous because, again, what impacts one country could also potentially impact you as well.
Right. So that what Samuel says is really interesting. I didn't know this about elections in Brazil, that it's electronic, it's online. That's fascinating. If there's not a paper record of it, that could spark people being concerned about legitimacy.
Oh, so there's like a technological device that's used. It's not necessarily online.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, that's more common. A lot of those print out paper records too. Like in the US, we have electronic devices too that can be used for voting, but there's always going to be a paper ballot that's generated from it.
Oh, these are some really awesome responses. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Okay, so let's look at one more case study from recent history. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about a hack on Sony Pictures that was perpetrated by a group in North Korea. This happened back in November of 2014. So many of you were probably pretty young at the time, and so probably don't remember living through this, but you might have read about it already. If you haven't, it's okay. Let me tell you the story. So a group of North Koreans identifying themselves as the Guardians of Peace, we're going to shorten that to GOP for this purpose. They attacked Sony Pictures' internal network. They destroyed thousands of network assets, and they leaked valuable and sensitive internal data online. Now, why did the North Korean group do this? It was designed to coerce Sony into canceling the release of a movie. The poster's right here. The movie was called The Interview. This film was seen as offensive to the North Koreans' leader, Kim Jong-un. And it was because in the movie, the whole plot of the movie is that these two Americans go to North Korea under the auspices of doing an interview with Kim Jong-un, and they assassinate him. So he didn't like that. This group of North Koreans didn't like that. So they decided to hack the movie studio that was putting out the movie, Sony. These hackers, after they got into Sony's network, they remained hidden within the network for months. Sony had no idea that they were in their network. They kept escalating their privileges within the network and engaged in lateral movement until they mapped Sony's entire network. So they had access to everything in Sony. By employing this malware that was unregistered by Sony's antivirus software and extricating data in small quantities over multiple weeks, they didn't raise any alarms. The attackers were able to steal sensitive employee information. They stole movie scripts. They stole actual movies that had yet to be released. And they stole email communications between executives there that were very embarrassing. So after they got in there, they eventually released a customized malware, which just destroyed over 3,000 of Sony's computers and over 800 of their servers. And it led to a temporary shutdown on the communications network on which much of Sony's business operated. Now, Sony's a massive global corporation, and they were brought to their knees basically by this group of North Koreans. Okay, so story continues here. After the destruction of these Sony servers and threats of physical violence by this North Korean group, the GOP, major theater chains in the US, like AMC, and trade associations here decided to cancel the screenings of the movie. So essentially, the GOP kind of won in their goal of crippling Sony and getting the movie shut down. Sony itself also backed off, and they canceled most of the movies, most of the 3,500 screenings that were planned. This led to the president of the United States at the time, Barack Obama, to criticize Sony. He said that they were backing down and giving into the demands of a foreign country to curb American free speech rights. Unprecedented here that a foreign power is able to stop an American movie from being shown. For months after this meltdown, this North Korean group, the GOP, leaked this stolen data onto public websites. And this compromised employee security and privacy. It devalued the company's intellectual property, and it really embarrassed Sony's leadership. Now, some people would say that the embarrassing Sony's leadership part was not not a huge issue. It actually revealed a lot of awful things that some of the executives were saying. It contributed to the Me Too movement, and it actually enabled some people who probably shouldn't have been in those positions of power to be removed. Now, these leaks were covered extensively in the press, and the Sony leadership faced wide criticism for failing to properly invest in cybersecurity measures, which could have made themselves less vulnerable to this intrusion or lateral movement. So Sony gets a ton of criticism here. The key takeaway: this was such a major event because it was the first instance of a state actor, North Korea, using a cyber attack against a non-state actor, which was Sony. It has huge implications, and we want to hear from you now about it. So, first question: are there any ways this hack could have been prevented? And then second question: what do you make of the decision to not show the movie in theaters, for Sony to back down, for the movie theater chains to back down? What do we think about those? You can answer either question in Discord.
First of all, this entire situation sounds like the plot to a movie.
Right? I'm surprised no one makes a movie about this, but then they'll run the risk of North Korea trying to stop that, probably.
Definitely poking the bear unnecessarily. But no, this was a real thing that happened in 2014, I believe.
Yep. Do you remember it at all?
I do. I actually wanted to go see the movie. I was 13 at the time, and I specifically remember it not being at AMC anymore. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but they ended up just like releasing it on Netflix.
Right.
And so you still could see it in the US. So it was a back down from having it take place in theaters, and they definitely lost a lot of money from that. But there was still the ability to like view and access the movie on platforms.
Yeah, that's a good point. So answering the first question here, more extensive security measures could have helped, definitely. But of course, how would a company expect the whole country to hack them? Yeah, that's a great point. They're not they weren't expecting something so sophisticated. I think like maybe they would think like another movie studio would maybe try to hack to like steal some IP. I don't know, but definitely not thinking about North Korea doing that.
This is a phrase that unfortunately we've all gotten super familiar with in the past couple of years, but like this was truly unprecedented at the time. Right. Never before were there situations or scenarios that would have provoked a company to be like, actually, we should definitely invest in some cybersecurity. So to be fair, to a certain degree, there was no warning that this was a threat that was on the table.
Right. And then this whole issue of email security, that was actually a big issue in the 2016 presidential election in the US as well. And most people didn't even realize like what they were talking about with it, but just this phrase of like emails, like Hillary's emails became this kind of boogeyman, I guess.
Yeah, it was almost like a meme, and it
right
changed her prospects in the US for when she was running for public office. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but like there's a similar situation happened in Michigan at the University of Michigan recently where professors' emails got leaked.
Right.
And so it's a reoccurring problem and it's not unprecedented anymore, but people still aren't taking it seriously to that degree quite yet.
I'm going to read Nicole's answer here. I like this. Cyber terrorism is spreading, and this also brings some misunderstanding about hackers. Some people live under the assumption that hackers are necessarily bad, but surprisingly, most of the hackers currently active are actually white hat hacks. They are the one trying to find the security branches before someone with ill intentions finds them. Yes, amazing point. If you are a benevolent hacker, you can identify the fatal flaws in the security of some critical infrastructure, say, and then be able to tell the authorities about it or to patch it. So for instance, if you figure out that a nuclear power plant has some vulnerabilities because you've hacked it, then you could patch it up and prevent that from happening. So that's a really, really great point, Nicole.
It really speaks to the idea that some people think of tech as something that's like dangerous or scary, but tech is actually very neutral. It's the way that we leverage it as people that's the point of contention. Looking at what Radha said, it's almost like she's proposing a global movement from the AI and cybersecurity associations. So almost like a cybersecurity council equivalent of the UN.
Right, the UN. Yes, I was hoping that someone would make that connection. Maybe there's an opportunity for that.
Collaboration and coordination are key, which we identified. So in the same way that the pandemic has presented the idea that viruses can mutate and evolve, cyber viruses also have the potential to mutate and evolve. So even if you like create a robust system, it's something that you have to constantly update in order to stay protected from what's like new and prevalent.
Let's look at number 2 here. I think that Sony could have faced criticism for any decision they made. Backing down was seen as giving in to an aggressor, but if they didn't do anything, they would have gotten a lot of backlash for being aware that they were risking people's lives and still showing the movie. Yes, if something awful had happened at a movie theater, it would have looked very, very bad if they had shown it.
Right. No, these are some really, really great reactions. It's an interesting case study that I think will continue to be relevant for the next couple of years.
Yeah. I linked it in the previous slide and it'll also be in the readings, but you can read the whole story about what happened and get all the details. It is fascinating. Okay. Quick reminder. We are down to 2 weeks left in the fellowship. That means that your Civic Innovators portfolio is due soon. It's due on April 17th. Our last bonfire is next Monday, the 11th, and then you have basically 6 days to finish up your portfolio. The link is right here, and then I always put it in the slides. The instructions are right here. At the bottom, there's a sample case brief written by our steering committee chair. It's fantastic. And then the link to the form is there as well. Here's our calendar. So on Wednesday, Darielle is going to be running a cool session on using Notion to build websites. Fascinating stuff. The next night, there is a session with a friend of CU who's a social entrepreneur named Maria Underwood. She's going to be talking about how when disaster strikes, how to make the biggest impact in those moments. And then finally on Saturday, Nick Varney is continuing his systems thinking series. If you've attended those, I'm sure they'll be at this one as well. If you haven't attended, you can still jump in. You don't need to have been to previous sessions. Here are the week's readings and videos. First is the Sony story, then a website with tools of foreign policy, lots of great videos and explainers on this website. It's from a partner of ours, the Council on Foreign Relations. And then third is an open source international relations website that has tons and tons of great articles. You can check this site every day for new stuff on IR if that's what you're really interested in. Okay, huge announcement. Really excited about this opportunity for you. This is from another one of our partners, Arizona State University. They are offering an all expenses paid full week Civic Learning Institute this summer on campus. So if you have the travel bug, if you want to get out of where you currently are and you're interested in studying at ASU for a week, please apply to this. You can even make $500 when you go if you commit to doing a research project while at the Institute. So lots and lots of cool stuff is going to happen there. I will also put this in the email recap so you can see the link. And if you have questions about it, feel free to email me. Finally, some other quick announcements. International Working Group still open. And finally, next week, like I said, is going to be our last bonfire. People have been asking me about steering committee or about project proposals. We're going to go over all of that next week. We'll have a representative from the steering committee there, so you can learn all about the work that they do and what you'll need to do if you want to propose a project for a stipend. All right, let's do some Q&A. Put your questions in the Zoom chat, the Zoom Q&A.
No one seems to have any questions for us quite yet.
Yeah, it takes a little bit. All right, here we go.
Claire, should we submit both case briefs together or one at a time?
One at a time. So you'll post the link to one and then the link to another. Just submit a separate form. It literally takes 1 minute to submit the form.
And it's probably via paper form?
Yes, there's a paper form link.
Cool. All right.
There we go. What is the effect of either unipolarity, bipolarity, and multipolarity? I'm not sure what that's referring to. Do you know what that's referring to?
I do not. Liam, please provide additional context to your question. Like in relations to cybersecurity, in relations to international relations, or even defining those key phrases. Be cool.
Is there a specific person we could talk to if we have questions specific to our case briefs? Yes, talk to me, please. Feel free to email me, message me on Discord. And if it's something that you want more detailed help with, then I can always forward you to a person who can work with you one-on-one, or I can try my best to help you there. What dates does the AASU Research Institute take place? It's over there's multiple weeks that they're doing it. So when you click on the link to apply, you'll see all of the dates there. I believe they're mostly in July, those dates.
It will be taking place over the course of this upcoming summer.
Correct. This summer, I believe in July at Arizona State. The portfolio, is it going to be graded? No, there are no grades at CU. I will be checking it to make sure you've done an honest job with it, but this is for you. You're doing this because you really want to learn about the topic that you're investigating. You're not doing this for a grade from me or anyone else.
Yes. That being said, though, what you put into it is what you'll get out of it.
Right.
So it can be a really amazing experience to kind of cultivate a finished product on your perspective on something. And we do have some really cool opportunities for the case briefs that stand out. So stay tuned for that.
Right. And we want you to be able to use this at potential job interviews, internship interviews, maybe a future academic endeavor. It's a good way to start that.
So Zara asks the question, how can we keep going with Civics Unplugged even after the fellowship ends? This is a really important question, and we're going to be diving into it more specifically in probably next week's Bonfire, but to kind of give you a glimpse into the future, this community is your home for the long run, and we're excited to provide internship opportunities, learning opportunities through Civic Gym, spots to like fund your really cool community civic innovation projects, and tons of other opportunities. So there is a home for you at CU post the fellowship, and there's a long list of opportunities that are awaiting, and we'll talk more about that as we start to wrap up.
Yeah, and like I said, next week we'll talk about steering committee, we'll talk about project proposals. There's lots of things coming down the pike. We'll also keep having events. Like I'm going to be doing another courtside about an upcoming Supreme Court case later in April. We'll be doing events still. So next week is not the end of CU by any means.
Yes.
Okay, so Liam, the idea of international relations in that multipolarity is where large nations make major decisions together. Bipolarity is when two nations make compromises, et cetera. Thank you for that clarification. I apologize. I don't remember now what the question was. I think what was it? Which approach do we think is best? That's not an easy answer.
Unfortunately, the answer is something along the lines of it depends on the situation and what it pertains to. But I pose the challenge that you explore this in your case brief, and maybe even like share it out with the community afterwards.
Yeah, what I would do is look at examples where you've seen bipolarity and then compare it to when you've seen multipolarity. So, for example, just off the top of my head, you could look at the Iraq War, the second Iraq War in the early 2000s. That was an example where the U.S. was trying to build a coalition to go into Iraq and remove Saddam Hussein from power, but they were unable to. Famously, France was unwilling to join that alliance, and NATO was not part of that mission. It was really just just two countries, the United States and Britain, that decided on that. So that could be an interesting case study to look at how that would played out with multipolarity. Can it be done in groups and case briefs? I mean, I think it is allowed, but I want to confirm. Yes, it is allowed. Just make sure you credit everyone that is working on it. But yes, that's fine. How much power does the UN have to enforce the SDGs? Not much. That's the problem. And that was one of the criticisms is that some countries might not take those SDGs as seriously as others. It's kind of up to each individual country to work towards them, but there is no real enforcement mechanism there. The hope is that everyone would mutually benefit if we do get to those goals. So like, why would we not work to them? But you'll see sometimes this concept in economics called the tragedy of the commons. It's this idea, if there's not one central group that's kind of looking out for the well-being of the whole, or one person looking out for the well-being of the whole, then people are going to abuse their privileges. Check it out, Tragedy of the Commons. I think it might relate to this question. I see some things in the chat. I didn't see them before. Let me quickly look.
Regarding how to format your portfolio, there's actually a slide in this Bonfire that will dive into the step-by-step process of how to submit your portfolios and your briefs, and that will be shared with you in the follow-up email that comes out at the end of every Bonfire.
Yep, it's also in the syllabus. And we're still in the planning phases of a summer event, for those that are asking about that.
And
Great.
Yeah, I think those are all the major questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for joining tonight. Hope to see you at our last Bonfire next week. Thank you, Chabu, for joining. Really appreciate you being here.
Me.
Wonderful. All right, everybody, have a great night. We'll see you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.